All right, everybody. So I decided I need to review some games for some consoles that I haven't covered any games for yet. There are some consoles in my collection for which I have limited games, and one of those is the Sega Master System. It's one of the more recent consoles that I picked up, and if you collect for the Master System, you know that, once you pick up those, the games that everybody tends to have, finding the other games to collect for the system is a bit harder, For the Atari 2600, it's like 100 games that you can collect before you start getting nothing but repeats. Same with the NES, you get yourself 100 games before you start thinking every time you go into a gaming store, oh, I already have all of these. With the Sega Master System, it is 10 games that are super common, and then all the rest of them tend to be a little bit less so, and so you don't see them as much. And so because I haven't been collecting for the Master System very long, and if I'm being perfectly honest, have not been too incredibly dedicated at collecting for it, I just don't have that many games for it. But one of the ones I am very happy to have is this, what you're watching right now, is Shinobi. Now, here's the thing you have to understand about the 1980s, is that ninjas were new. And I don't mean that they were new in the sense that, they had just been invented, because we're talking about the stealth assassins of feudal Japan. So, yeah, I understand the fact that, ninjas were not new, but they were a new concept in terms of how they were impacting the media in the United States. I mean, sure, you started getting some ninjas showing up in movies and whatnot in the 70s, but the 80s is when ninjas went nutso bananas. It would be, imagine if, everyone, if you were living in a time in which everyone realized that pirates were interesting. Pirates, by this point, well established. Ninjas, kind of new territory. And so there was a whole mythos being built up around ninjas, what were ninjas actually capable of? What did they do? How did they behave? What did they really look like? Etc., etc. And one of the early entries into the video gaming mythos of the ninja is Shinobi. This game goes back to the arcade, and when did it come out in the arcade? We're talking 1987 is when this came out for the arcade. And it was also released on literally everything. All of the things. Basically, every home computer that existed at the time. We're talking Amiga, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, of course, your Atari home computers, the Atari ST, all of those. But in terms of consoles, it was released on the Master System, and it was released on the NES. And the NES version and the Master System version are two very different games. They have some similarities, obviously. They're based on the same thing, but the way they look and the way they feel, they are only semi-related to each other. The one thing that holds with them, well, here are the things that are true of both games. Number one, that you have throwing stars as your primary weapon. That's number one. Number two, that you can jump between the platform below and the platform above. And the enemy design is basically the same, but not exactly the same. And the thing about the Master System version is the sprites are huge compared to the NES version. Your character sprite is massive on the screen in comparison with the NES version. And in general, the game feels a little more zoomed in, which means that you have a little less room to maneuver in, but it doesn't feel constricting. It's really interesting how, like, it's a very smooth, easy to pick up, easy to understand gaming experience. You know, you immediately understand, like, oh, I'm a ninja. I throw throwing stars. And, like, and I will say this, you are rescuing little kids. I don't know why these evil bad guys of various martial arts types have taken so many kids hostage. This is not a game that really explains those things to you. Maybe the arcade version does, which I've never played the arcade version. But the NES version and the Master System version, you just are thrown into the game. The opening screen is the face of a ninja, and it just says Shinobi, and then there's some Japanese characters, and then that's it. And you hit start, and then you are throwing stars and killing dudes. And then you are rescuing little kids. In the NES version, they do not look like little kids. It's hard to tell what exactly they look like. Little old men, maybe? But in the Master System version, they definitely look like little kids. I don't know why these bad guys are so intent on kidnapping little kids and holding them hostage in a pizza restaurant. Just kidding. That part is not true. They are not holding them hostage in a pizza restaurant to drink their blood and gain their powers. But, yeah. So, this Master System version, the interesting thing about the Master System is that there are times when the Master System is really impressive, both in terms of the gameplay and the music and the things that it's able to do, the general feel of the game as it's presented to you. Because there are a lot of games that came out on both the Master System and the Genesis, or the Mega Drive, depending on where you live. And the funny thing about it is that some of those games look pretty close, are very similar to each other from the Master System version to the Genesis version. And then some of those Master System versions are absolutely primitive looking in comparison. And when it comes to Shinobi, you are not going to mistake this for 16-bit graphics at all. You can see the pixels, they are big and blocky. It is very easy to tell that this is an 8-bit game. But I will say that, like, the animation of your character, the motion, the control of the game is tight. And it feels good. I actually feel like the jumping between platforms is smoother in the Master System version than it is in the NES version. The NES version, your sprite is smaller and maybe a little quicker. I don't know. I would have to go back and play both side by side to really be able to tell. But this Master System version is a really, really impressive version of Shinobi. In some ways, though, it reminds me, just in the way that it plays, in the sort of formulaic, throw your stars, kill this enemy, jump up, kill that enemy, jump down. Because it is kind of formulaic. This game blew our minds back in the day, but when you go back and play it now, it's not as varied an experience. Back then it was just oh my god, it's a video game with a ninja in it. And that was enough for us. Like, we were minds blown wide open. We just couldn't even handle how cool that was. And of course, there are more advanced ninja video games. Ninja Gaiden is a much more advanced ninja video game in a lot of ways. And yeah, there are others that would come along later and were just much more graphically impressive, much more gameplay-wise impressive. Actually, in some ways, this is kind of like Kung Fu, if you remember Kung Fu for the NES. Now, granted, Kung Fu, those enemies are coming at you fast and frantic. They are not nearly as fast and frantic in Shinobi, but the sort of formulaic way in which they just come at you and you just handle them or don't. And that's the entirety of the gameplay. And then you rescue the little kid and you rack up some high score, and that's pretty much how you do it. And then I did, in the gameplay, I made it to the first boss, but I utterly failed to figure out what his pattern was. I completely failed to dodge those orange smoke things. I'm not entirely sure what he's throwing at me. Looks like smoke. And the orange smoke just wrecked my day every time until I died. And that was unfortunate. I didn't enjoy that as much. But up until the boss, it was very, very, straightforward, simple, less involved and less varied than, say, any of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, including the first one, which, everyone knows is problematic. I'm not a very big fan of the first one. I know there are people who are, but I think that tends to be that, if you are a better gamer than I am, and you are capable of playing that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, then maybe you enjoy that one more. I remember pumping tons of quarters and meeting strangers and just playing, because you would just play with whoever was there on that big 4-player Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, which was, came out on the NES as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. That was just mind-blowing, the many different kinds of enemies that you would come across that were taken directly from the TV show, and immediately, your bosses are Bebop and Rocksteady and Shredder and Krang and, all the guys from the show. In Shinobi, it's a lot less variety. It gets by a lot on just the charm of it being a ninja-based video game. As it is, it's really simple, and it doesn't hold up quite as well as I would have liked it to, because I did play some serious Shinobi back in the day, on the NES primarily. But I love this game because I love ninjas, because who didn't? Everybody was finding out about ninjas, everybody was all about it. Random thing. My father, here's one of the cool things about, my dad and growing up when I did. My dad is a black belt in Taekwondo, which, goes a long way in the my dad can beat up your dad debates. But beyond that, he just had a general interest in martial arts. It's how I saw a lot of Kung Fu movies as a kid. I saw all the Bruce Lee movies as a child. Before I was 10 years old, I had seen everything Bruce Lee ever did. And was a big fan. And also, he just collected a lot of, martial arts stuff. And he purchased from Century Martial Arts, which is where you get all the good martial arts stuff back in the day and also now. He purchased an entire ninja outfit, complete, like a ninja gi, like the whole thing, with the mask and everything, including the split-toed ninja shoes, which I used to just rock to school. I used to just show up at school in ninja shoes and be like, "What's up now? My big toe is in a different part of the shoe than the rest of my toes. I could probably climb walls." Like, it was pretty cool. Like, I cannot stress enough how big ninjas were to us in the 80s. It was everything. And so, does this game get by a lot on just the charm of being a ninja game in a time when we were all just completely ape nuts for ninjas? Yeah, that's exactly what this game did. But does it make it less of a good game? No, the fact that it's kind of repetitive makes it less of a good game. You know, when you play it, when ninjas are a well-established concept within society, it's a little bit less fun. But you know what? There's still a lot of charm here. It is still pretty darn fun, and this Master System version is a really good Master System game. You know, there are some Master System games that just are not as good as their Genesis counterparts or their NES counterparts. I would say that this one is every bit as good as the one on the NES, although it is a different experience for a lot of reasons. Anyway, let me put a final score on it. So, for the final score for Shinobi on the Sega Master System, I am going an 8 out of a possible 10 copies of American Ninja 4 on VHS. Why 8 out of 10? Well, yeah, it's a little higher than I thought I would go on this one, but you know, the nostalgia factor is high. And also, I have to consider the fact that this is one of the better games on the Sega Master System. It's one of the better games. It's not too incredibly hard to find a copy. It's a good game to have on the Master System, and so, yeah, I do recommend it. It is fun to play. It is pretty formulaic, I'm not gonna lie. But if you, like me, are someone who came of age when ninjas were it, like, then you know what it is, and you probably feel the nostalgia as much as I do. Also, American Ninja 4, my goodness, this was a series that started out ridiculous and got more ridiculous the longer it went. By the way, there is an American Ninja 5, but it doesn't star the original guy, and it has Pat Morita in it, Mr. Miyagi from your Karate Kid series. Yeah, so what a weird series. Anyway, yeah, look up American Ninja if you want some, like, stupid martial arts movies. Like, sometimes the dumber a martial arts movie is, the more fun it is, and you can't get too much dumber than the American Ninja series. Anyway, people, that's gonna do it for this one. I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.